Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another edition of Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. How is everybody doing out there? I'm hoping this show is finding everybody doing well. They're healthy and happy and just cheery. I would like to welcome everybody to Movie Goodness, and for everybody who has continued to support this show throughout the years, thank you so much for your continued support of this show, of this network. And words can't express how grateful I am to you. If you're new to the show, thank you as well. I hope today I say something that may cause you to say, yeah, I'm going to continue to check out this fool. You know, I'm going to continue to listen to this guy just talk movies and current events. And speaking of which, on today's show, we're going to talk about something current that is very important worldwide, not just here in the United States, but I think it's important globally, and that is affirmative action. And as a black man, as a father to two young black beautiful women, who are in college, by the way, this is very prevalent in my life. Affirmative action affects me, my kids, you know, just friends, family, everybody. Whether you're opposed to it or not, it does affect you. And I would say off the bat that when it comes to the debate of affirmative action, I'm kind of straddling the fence with it. I understand both sides. I understand those who oppose it because they feel that they're being discriminated against. And I feel it from the positive side that the reason we're getting this help is because we are discriminated against. There's really no way around it. It's like a catch-22. There really are no winners. Somebody's going to be unhappy. And we just had a ruling from the Supreme Court that is set to change the course of history. And we're going to dive into all of that. We're going to discuss the history, the origins of affirmative action, what took place in the Supreme Court just a few weeks ago, and we're going to dive into a film that is loosely related to this subject. It is the 2014 film Dear White People. So, without further ado, let's jump into our discussion of affirmative action. And in case you don't know what affirmative action is and what it all consists of, affirmative action, which is also known as positive action or positive discrimination, involves sets of policies and practices within a government or organization seeking to include particular groups that were historically discriminated against based on their gender, their race, sexuality, creed, or nationality, in areas in which such groups are underrepresented, such as education and employment. Historically and internationally, support for affirmative action has sought to achieve goals such as bridging inequalities in employment and pay, increasing access to education, as well as promoting diversity. The nature of affirmative action policies varies from region to region and exists on a spectrum from a hard quota to merely targeting encouragement for increased participation. Some countries use a quota system, reserving a certain percentage of government jobs, political positions, and school vacancies for members of a certain group. An example of this is the reservation system in India. They have a quota system that they use in that country, or in that region rather. In some other jurisdictions where quotas are not used, minority group members are given preference or special consideration in selective processes. in the United Kingdom, hiring someone simply because of their protective group status without regard to their performance is illegal. However, the law in the United Kingdom does allow for membership in a protected and disadvantaged group to be considered for hiring and promotion when the group is underrepresented in a given area, and if the candidates are of equal merit, in which case membership in a disadvantaged group can become a tiebreaker. An alternate approach common in the United Kingdom and elsewhere in Europe is positive action. Under this approach, the focus tends to be on ensuring equal opportunity and, for example, targeted advertising campaigns to encourage ethnic minority candidates to join the police forces. This is often described as being colorblind, but some American sociologists have urged that this is insignificant. Here in the United States, affirmative action is very controversial, and public opinion on the subject is divided. Supporters of affirmative action urge that it promotes equality and representation for groups which are social economically disadvantaged or have faced historical discrimination or oppression. Opponents of affirmative action have argued that it is a form of reverse discrimination, meaning that it tends to benefit the most privileged within minority groups at the expense of the least fortunate within majority groups, or that when applied to universities, it can hinder minority students by placing them in courses for which they have not been adequately prepared for. Here is the origins of affirmative action. The term affirmative action was first used in the United States in Executive Order number 10925, signed by then President John F. Kennedy on March the 6th, 1961, which included a provision that government contractors take affirmative action to ensure that applicants are employed and employees are treated fairly during employment without regard of their race, creed, color, or national origin. It was used to promote actions that achieved non-discrimination. In 1965, then President Lyndon B. Johnson issued Executive Order 11246, which required government employees to hire without regard to race, religion, and national origin, and take affirmative action to ensure that the applicants are employed and that employees are treated during employment without regard of their race, color, religion, sex, or natural origin. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, and origin. Neither executive order nor the Civil Rights Act authorized groups' preferences. Affirmative action is intended to promote the opportunity of defining minority groups within a society to give them equal access to that of their majority population. It is often instituted for government and educational settings to ensure that certain designated groups within a society are able to participate in all provided opportunities, including promotional, educational, and training opportunities. The stated justification for affirmative action by its proponents is to help compensate for past discrimination, persecution, or exploitation by the ruling class of a culture, and to address existing discrimination. Fast forwarding to a couple of weeks ago, in June of 2023, the Supreme Court of the United States decided a landmark case, Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, holding race-conscious college admissions processes to be unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. However, the ruling does not explicitly apply to the U.S. military academies, and it allows for students' discussion of race to continue to be considered in the context of how race affects the applicant's life, so long as that discussion is concretely tied to a quality of character or unique ability that the particular applicant can contribute to the university. The Supreme Court's decision to end race conscious admissions will likely or very likely change higher education in complicated ways. Some of them will be obvious, including immediate changes in the demographics of campus. Others, though, could also change socially, affecting the doctors who treat you, the judges who hear your case, and the college choices for black students. What will happen to a student body at the 100 or so selective colleges and universities that practice this race conscious admissions? 9 states already banned this form of affirmative action at their public universities, providing a guide to what could happen. When Michigan banned race conscious admissions in 2006, black undergrad enrollment at the state's flagship campus at Ann Arbor declined to 4% in 2021 from 7% in 2006. A similar drop took place at the University of California's most selective schools after Proposal 209 in 1996 banned race conscious admissions. That year, black students at the University of California, Los Angeles made up 7% of the student body. By 1998, the percentage of black students had fell to 3.43%. But it's not just undergrads. At least in the immediate future, the Supreme Court's ruling is expected to lower the number of black and Latino students at medical schools, law schools, and other professional degree programs. Groups including the Association of American Medical Colleges and the American Medical Association said that states that have banned race-conscious admissions have seen the numbers of minority medical students drop by roughly 37%, reducing the pipeline of doctors from these groups. Nationally, about 5.7% of doctors are black and 6.8% identify as Hispanic. The American Bar Association also has expressed concern, saying that affirmative action assures a more racially diverse profession and judicially, which the organization says is essential to the legitimacy of the legal system. Now, with a little good news, black colleges can see a surge in applicants after George Floyd's murder in Minnesota by the police in 2020. Black students who were seeing the country's divide and how racially charged everything was began to flock to historically black colleges and universities. The effect of the Supreme Court ruling could be similar, said David A. Thomas, the president of Morehouse College, a selective HBCU in Atlanta. College-ready black students and their families will say, "We don't want to go to a place where we're not wanted," he said in an interview, and they will look for alternatives. Thomas projects applicants could double from 7,000 to 14,000 in the next few years. The college dorms are already at full capacity, and the college would need to increase its facilities by at least a third over the next 3 years to accommodate any additional 1,000 students while maintaining small class sizes and course quality, he says. He expects there to be many more men who deserve, based on merit, to be at Morehouse that wants to be here than I can serve today, he said. quite frankly, that would financially be beneficial to the college if all we were interested in was the bottom line. We're primarily tuition dependent. More students mean more tuition, but it will compromise delivering on our promise to our students, on my view. This is the tension. Thomas isn't the only HBCU leader feeling a mix of excitement and trepidation. For example, Leslie Rodriguez, Senior Vice President for Student Experience at St. Augustine University in Raleigh, North Carolina, told ABC that campus leaders are considering plans to add more domes and update the campus HVAC system and IT infrastructure to be ready for more students. George French, president of Clark Atlanta University, told ABC News that if more students seek out HBCUs, the institutions will need not just financial, but programmatic support. If you come to an HBCU for one of our traditional disciplines, whether it's law, medical, education, that's one thing. But if you come for thermonuclear science, we don't have the capability, French told ABC. And there are many, many more. There are even some that oppose it. Some presidents at these HBCUs who kind of oppose it. I mean, they don't oppose it to the point where they're 100% against it, but like some of the concerns that from a couple of them that I read, it's the capacity. Don't think they can handle it, financially wise. Well, I mean, financially, yeah, because you're going to get your your money from tuition and all this other stuff, but they don't have the facilities to handle all that. But at least currently, hopefully they can, expand, because HBCUs, unlike these big universities that are state funded, there are no state funding for HBCUs. That money comes from tuitions and donorship. They don't get federal funding as like LSU down here in Baton Rouge. That's state funded, and so it's it's a problem. It's a problem. But we shall see. We shall see what's the alternative for these students. Now that they're being basically kicked to the curb. But I want to use another example before we get into our review. And this is something that it is affirmative action, but it goes by another name. But it is not working. It hasn't worked since they implemented it in the NFL. Yes, I'm talking about the Rooney Rule. And the Rooney Rule is basically affirmative action in the National Football League terms. And it's a policy that requires teams to interview ethnic minority candidates for head coaching positions and for senior football operation positions like GM and stuff like that, in the office. It is indeed an example of affirmative action, even though before 2022, there were no hiring quotas or hiring preferences given to minorities, only an interview quota. Teams were required to only interview a candidate if they have a vacant head coaching position. That didn't mean they had to hire. It was just they had to go through the interview process with a minority. The first active hiring quota was established just this past year, and it mandates that at least one member of the team's offensive coaching staff must be either an ethnic minority or a woman. The Rooney Rule was established in 2003, and variations of the rule is now in place in other industries. Since the Rooney Rule was established, several NFL franchises had hired black head coaches, including the Steelers, whose owner this is named after, Dan Rooney. He hired head coach Mike Tomlin in 2007. The Steelers, however, had already interviewed Ron Rivera, who is Hispanic, to fulfill the requirement before interviewing Mike Tomlin. And Dan Rooney himself contends that Mike Tomlin's hiring was not a result of the rule in an ironic twist. He actually was the man for the job. And if you go through Mike Tomlin's career, you can agree the man has never had a losing season since he became the head coach in 2007. The overall percentage of black coaches has jumped to 22%, up from 6% prior to the Rooney Rule. Uh, for the 2019 season, 8 NFL teams had head coaching vacancies to fill. However, only one team, the Miami Dolphins, hired a non-white coach, Brian Flores, who was then fired 3 years later after having 2 winning seasons in his last 2 years. You do the math. As of 2020, the NFL had 3 black head coaches, the same number as they had in the year 2003, which is the same year the Rooney Rule was adopted. Going into the 2022 season, the number of minority coaches in the NFL defined up to 6. Todd Bowles for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Lovie Smith in Houston, and Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, who are all African American. Ron Rivera in Washington is Hispanic. Mike McDaniel in Miami is multiracial. And Robert Saleh, who is the head coach of the New York Jets, is a Muslim of Lebanese descent. And I only bring up the Rooney Rule because that is the first time that I understood what affirmative action was. When I was younger, I didn't know exactly how affirmative action worked, even though the Rooney Rule really didn't work if you go by the numbers and the tenure of the black or minority head coaches in the NFL. They don't get time. You have no time to win if you're a minority head coach in the NFL. But yeah, that is affirmative action in a nutshell. And like I said to start off this show, I'm of two minds of the situation. I'm really understanding of those who are opposed, if there's valid reason. Me personally, as a like I said, as a black man, I don't want you to give me a job because I'm black. I want you to give me a job because I earned the job. I don't want a handout, because in that regard, I feel like you owe me, or I owe you, I should say. You're gonna constantly hold that over my head. Oh, well, I gave you this job, Yeah, I can't work like that. I'd rather earn the job. I'll appreciate it more. I'll feel confident that one day you're not going to wake up and say, you know what, this ain't working out. You can go, because I don't know the job that I was given. I'd rather earn it. That's just me. But at the same time, it's easier said than done, for blacks or minorities to work hard, go to work every day, do everything they're told to do, and still get passed over time and time again for a promotion or for a pay raise or whatever the case may be. I've seen it. I've been a victim of it several times, so I know how it feels. That's why I'm kind of on the fence with it. But at the same time, it's a slippery slope. It really is. And if it's done right, I guess it can work, but I don't think it can. See, here's the problem with affirmative action in a lot of folks' eyes, and I'm saying white folks, what I meant to say, in a lot of white folks' eyes. The problem with affirmative action, they feel that minorities are getting something for nothing, that they haven't earned their keep, that they haven't worked for it, or that blacks and Hispanics and women are taking their jobs. Well, the reality is this: you can't take something that you didn't try to get. A lot of people who making that argument, this doesn't even affect them. They have a job. Now, for those who that it deeply affects, that go through it, that have been through the discrimination, who has been passed over, who was systematic, dealt with systematic racism. Yeah, it affects. Yeah, it's a problem. It is a problem. And if you on the outside looking in, yeah, you don't see it. Of course you don't see it because it doesn't affect you. Won't you just trust the people who are going through it? Why every time, and I hate to bring it around to this, well, I don't hate it, but I already know what people gonna say. It's like the Black Lives Matter. When you say Black Lives Matter to some folks, it's like nails to a chalkboard. They don't want to hear it. They're like, well, all lives matter. Okay. Nobody said a black that black lives were better. We just said Black Lives Matter because they don't in this country, in the world. Actually, it don't matter. Yeah, we are treated like second class. Well, that's not true. I always say second class citizens. I think dogs get treated better than black folks in this country, and that's the God honest truth. It's like every time black people open their mouths, we're whining and complaining. You know, we're just expressing what's wrong, what we're going through. But it's always pick yourself up by your bootstraps type speeches that you get when a black person open their mouth about how they're being discriminated against. Well, you're not going through what I'm going through. And it's not fair that you can sit back and just poo-poo on my struggle. And it's infuriating. It's very infuriating. And that's why people are so angry. They wonder why black people are so angry. That's why, because you don't listen. You don't listen. We're screaming out for help, and you won't help. And nobody asking for a handout. We're just asking for help. And when you can't get the help, what's the next step? What's the next step? And you wonder why crime is the way it is. Anyway, I went on that long tangent, but the point is, I do not agree with this decision because it's going to snowball affect every other corner of our lives. As I was saying earlier in the show, this is going to put a hindrance to doctors and lawyers who can help those who are in, disadvantaged communities. And now what? You're putting roadblocks up that don't need to be put up. We were struggling as it is, and you make the struggle even worse. And now, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't agree with it. I hope that something changes. I hope that they go back to the table with this and try to, come to some sort of compromise. I don't know what kind of compromise you can come to, but we'll see. But I wholeheartedly disagree with this decision. So let's get into our review, everybody, of this film that touches in on this particular subject, and it is the 2014 satire, dark comedy, drama film, Dear White People. And it was written, directed, and co-produced by Justin Simien. And the film focused on the escalating racial tensions at a fictional, prestigious Ivy League college from the perspective of several black students. The film stars Tyler James Williams, Tessa Thompson, and I think this is the first time I saw Tessa Thompson in a movie. I could be wrong, but I think I'm not saying this is her first film, but I think this is the first time I was exposed to Tessa Thompson. And this film was adapted in 2017 by Netflix for a series that I didn't watch. I did not watch the Netflix show, but I did watch this film, and I must say this was an all right movie. It wasn't the greatest when I watched it back in 2014, but I was expecting one thing and I got another when I went in to see this. Actually, I didn't go to the theater. I rented it, but I remember when I rented the film, me and my wife sat down and watched. I thought it was going to be a comedy, which it is funny. It has funny parts in it, but I thought it was going to be like I don't know, like a Wayans brother type comedy. I know. I thought it was going to be more satirical, but and it wasn't. It was really serious. It was a really serious film, and I remember watching it the first time, and I didn't like it. Honestly, I did not like it. But when I rewatched it, and my wife watched the show, she was really into the show when it was on Netflix, and she enjoyed it. And I watched a couple of episodes, but I wasn't into it. But I rewatched the movie, and I had a different appreciation for it. The plot for Dear White People goes as Samantha White, who is played by Tessa Thompson, a media arts major at a fictional Westchester University, causes a stir at a prestigious, predominantly white school by criticizing white people and the racial transgressions at Winchester with her sharp-tongued, witty radio show entitled Dear White People and her self-published book, Ebony and Ivory. Tensions rise when Sam runs to become head of House of Armstrong, the historically black house on campus. She is opposed by Tony Fairbanks, an ex-boyfriend who harbors dreams of becoming a comedic writer, but all who is pressed by his father, the school's dean, to become a lawyer, to not give white people a chance to profile him, and to give nothing less than his best. Lionel Huggins, a black gay student portrayed in this film by Tyler James Williams, who you may know from Abbott Elementary, also Everybody Hates Chris. He gets a chance to find his place at Winchester by being recruited by the school's most prestigious student newspaper to write a piece on Sam and the black experience at Winchester, while Kyle, a white student and son of the school's president, and his club throw a blackface party in response to Sam's outspoken show. Black students appear at the party and a brawl ensues. To add a caveat to that, Kyle is Sam's boyfriend, so there's a lot of drama there. But it was interesting. Like I said, there was so much going on here, and I did not realize that the first time I watched it, and I really went. I had kind of checked out of it maybe 30 to 45 minutes into it, because I was like, what is this, you know? And it really, I thought this was going to be a comedy. I didn't think it was going to be something thought-provoking, if you will. But cooler heads prevailed. I did rewatch it, and I must say, I enjoyed it. You know, it is what it is. It's well done. It is well put together. I think it's slow at parts. Don't get me wrong. It felt real Spike Lee-ish at times. You know, early Spike. I'm talking like She's Gotta Have It type Spike. Not to that quality. I'm not saying that this was a Spike Lee joint. I mean, like, the tone. It just felt Spike Lee-ish, and the slow aspects of Spike. I'll put it that way. But the performances was great. I love Tyler James Williams. This was his first kind of grown-up role after Everybody Hates Chris, and I thought he did an excellent job. You know, Tessa Thompson, like I said, this put her on the map with me. That's why I wasn't shocked when she started popping up in everything else. And I thought that the direction was pretty decent from Justin Simeon, and he hasn't done much since this. He did the Bad Hair, I think, in 2020, but he has a movie coming out in about a week or so, The Haunted Mansion for Disney. So kudos to him. He finally got his big, I guess you could say, studio film, you know, blockbuster film in the horizon, and it looks good. I can't wait for that movie. So let's see how he does there. But I think he did an excellent job directing. This is debut, of course, and the film is very edgy. You know, it pulls no punches. It asks the hard questions, and what I respected about it, it asked hard questions even though we didn't know the answers, even though some of those questions didn't get answered, because you can't answer them. You know, and that was the point. and I respected it for that. Like I said, it's very, very edgy. The cast is impressive. Uh, Star-making performances from Tessa Thompson, from Tyler James Williams. Even though he had, he was known before this, he was the biggest name on here. Tiana Parrish, who was in this film, her career is taking off. She's about to be in what is it? They clone Tyrone and the Marvels, and and so I think she was in Candyman. It shows her career has shot off from this film. So I'm happy to see that, and like I said, it is a perfect film for today's generation. Now, this movie wasn't made for me. It was made for a certain generation, and I think this is the first time I can acknowledge that it didn't work for me on some levels, but I sat there and I openly admitted that I can see where this generation can gravitate to this film. And I'm only getting this from when I watched it recently. I wasn't that knowledgeable back then, but I got it when I watched it recently, and I appreciate it much more now. Dear White People, which came out in 2014, gets a letter grade of a C plus. I think it's a really good film, worth a watch. It touches in on a lot of the problems, not only in college and universities across the world. It touches in on social problems that we are going through, and I think it is a very important film. I can say that it is something that when I rewatched it, it made me want to watch the show. And the reason I didn't watch the show, because around that time I wasn't really feeling the movie. I should have rewatched the movie back then, but I only watched it that one time, and I didn't want to get into the show. But it made me want to get back into the show. It's probably something I need to do. Watch, see if Netflix still has that on there, and check it out. But yeah, the film from 2014, should I say, gets a C plus. Real good film, above average, very important film, I believe. And I think this generation would do a better job of appreciating this film. It was a film ahead of its time, should I say. And so, yeah, everybody, that's the show. Affirmative action. I don't know what more I can say. It's really heartbreaking that we're to this point, that we're debating if people get a chance to educate themselves, get a better education, a chance for people to provide for their families. There are laws for that. There are laws against that. There are people opposing that. It's a debate. This is an actual debate. Ah, man, it stinks, bro. This really stinks. And from my standpoint, who see both sides of the argument, but leans heavily on the approval side, it really stinks. I wish we can come to a compromise as people, as human beings. Take race out of the equation. Why? Anywho's, but that's the show. I would like to know, what are your feelings? Whether you're for or against, I still want to know. I would like to know what side of the fence you're leaning on when it comes to this discussion of affirmative action. You can email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on Twitter at KB Radio Network, and on other social media platforms, just look up the KB Radio Network. We are also on YouTube. Look for the KB Radio Network channel. Subscribe and like this video and all the other videos over there on YouTube, if you don't mind. Speaking of giving likes and loves, don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever it is you're currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this show today. I hope that the rest of your day, your week, your month, your year goes swimmingly. Can't wait to speak to you again. I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love one another. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.